What's one statistic you'd love to see in the afterlife? Story 1. I'm curious how many times I've had intimacy and how much I've drank. Prefer to have those stats broken down by person as well as specific adult beverage type of wine brand of beer in the event you an inside connection to someone in the afterlife. TOEX in advance. Story 2. As somebody who is generally considered to be the funny one in his friend group, I'd love to know how much laughter I really caused, whether that's minutes of laughter, number of jokes I cracked, some sort of percentile ranking of my humor quality, etc. Story 3. I'd like to know how many points of connection there are between me and a bunch of random people. For example, if I chose some random person in an Australian town, how many people would it take for me to know someone who knows that random person? It would be cool to know who I'm the most unconnected from. Would also be cool to know how closely connected I am to famous people. Story 4. How many people I've been in close proximity or interacted with who became famous for whatever reason. E.g., taken my children to the same soft play where a child who then became the next prime minister happened to be that day. Story 5. I'd like to know how many times I actually made a difference. I'm the NPC-est NPC of all time. Genuinely feel like I have achieved and will achieve nothing ever. I exist simply to exist and carry others. I'd like to know if my life ever had any value, or if all I did for my entire life was consume materials and take up space. Story 6. Said this semi-recently, but I'd love to see accidentally anniversaries or anniversaries we just didn't think of. A few weeks ago, there was a perfect spring day, in the sense it was warm but not hot, and it was windy but not so windy as to chill the air. It was so nice, in fact, I was taken back to my childhood in which I flew kites and those dollar store cardboard airplanes with the plastic noses like all day. Thinking of that made me wonder how novel it would be if those days lined up. If 15 years ago on that day I was flying kites in the same weather, and that's why my mind thought of it. We'll never know, but it makes you think. What other anniversaries occurred without us knowing? Story 7. Pooh brick wall length. For those of you who don't know, it's from a Robot Chicken sketch, where a guy goes to heaven is given a book where he can ask it anything about his life. That was one of the things he asks it. Story 8. Your final score, a value based on how you did in life, taking into account just about everything you've done, could have done, didn't do, etc., then maybe a ranking or percentile to see how you compare to everyone else. Story 9. Not exactly a statistic, but not only the many alternate timelines, but also the alternate timelines that I had access to. For example, meeting different people and becoming a different person because I was born in a different place compared to making a decision or choice. I would also want them to be categorized. This is so I can find the more important paths easily, like making a decision in a moment that was pivotal rather than happening to win the lottery. What I'm saying is that we all have that same possibility, so it's not as interesting. Story 10. Just one? There's a few. How many times they cheated? How many abortions saved the world from a brutal dictator versus deprived the world of a scientific discovery? How many particles would have arrived at a detector, neutrinos, photons, etc., but failed to do so because they interacted with my body instead? How many times? My poor color vision led to my passing in League of Legends. Percentage of cats that actively attempted to trip me versus just trying to get my attention. Story 11. I want to review every close call I've had in tennis over the years. I've won and lost tournaments over questionable calls, some of them being my own. If I've won thanks to my own incorrect calls, I'd like to apologize to my opponents in the afterlife. Story 12. For Muslim men, I feel really sorry for them. I mean, the 40 dark-haired virgins thing is just a non-starter. I mean, how awkward would that be? Now 40 platinum blonde sluts. Now we're talking Kingdom of Heaven. Story 13. How many photos I was in the background in. Relatively, how many people zoomed into me in a photo, whether to admire or make fun of me. Either way, am curious ETA. I live in NYC and work near touristy areas, so I feel like the number could be a lot higher than expected. Story 14. I wouldn't want to know who had a crush on me. That would break my little ghostly heart. I don't want to know who misses me. I'd want to know how I had a positive affect on people and the world in general. Story 15. An overall win or lose ratio, like be cool. Like what % of games or arguments in my life I've won. On a darker note, I'd want to see the worst things that I've indirectly caused or happened due to a chain reaction I started. Story 16. Thought about this a lot. I have lots of questions that would require omniscience to answer. One of my questions is how good I was at the mundane jobs I have done. In a competitive sense, if you think, how good was I at Tetris, you may need to specify the various platforms you played and when you played them. You might have been amazing on Game Boy but never played on a keyboard. So, you might be top for your town during the time you played, but nothing special in the all-time global scene. Fun question, though. A functional purpose for omniscience, to be sure. Story 17. I have a friend who has a habit of doing hilariously inept things. I was once 2,000 miles, 200 kilometers away, when somebody started to tell me a story. I stopped them and said, I was there. This isn't the first time this has happened either, just the most distant. Story 18. So I occasionally act at a local theater. A few months ago I was ushering and ended up talking to the lead actress for a little bit before the show started. I can't remember how it was brought up, but at one point she was like, "You're Havelock?" They, other actors' crew, were lore-dropping about you in the back room, and I thought you were a little old man. Stage manager said your parents were in the audience last night, and I got so confused. Last time I checked, I'm not a little old man. Story 19. This is something I think about a lot. I'd be content spending the rest of all time looking at spreadsheets and statistics about myself and others. It'd be interesting to find various outliers or see who's done the most of something. That would be my own personal little heaven. Story 20. Literally this. I always ponder about the most random things and think to myself, I wonder how many times that's happened. Then I realize that in the heat passing of the universe that no information is retained, and it's literally impossible to know. Story 21. That'd be fascinating. Like I know of 2 times when I had medical emergencies, but maybe I wasn't in any mortal danger. And what were the times I nearly tripped down the stairs or stepped in front of a car or choked on my sandwich or whatever. Story 22. I'm nearly certain mine was a minigame in RuneScape. Was in the top 1,000 at one point out of millions of players and billions of people. Can't think of anything else I'd ever crack top 1K in the world of. Story 23. I'm gonna guess for me it was Family Guy Trivia. There was an app that you could do quizzes of pretty much anything, answering as fast as possible against other people. I ranked 1 in my country and 13 in the world for a season. Needless to say, I watched it a lot in that time frame. Story 24. Imagine it just doesn't elaborate on it, though. You don't get to find out why getting the Diet Coke instead of normal that one time stopped the nuclear war. Just all it says is, most positive impact Diet Coke purchase. You'd be so confused for all of eternity. Story 25. How far into the butterfly effect and chaos theory are we allowed to get? Some philosophers might argue that cancer being cured tomorrow might depend on whether or not you snore tonight. Cue the X-Files theme. Story 26. I imagine for most of us it would be some standard everyday action that had a huge ripple effect. Something like calling your friend as they were about to walk about the door, causing them to leave 5 minutes later, which caused them to have a discussion with a person, which caused that person to think of that discussion later, which reminded them of something during a conversation, which caused them to relay a seemingly unimportant bit of information, and so on, which ended up saving some lives in the end. Story 27. My wife and I got married in a historic church. It was so small that she had to walk from the reception area to the church in her dress. Somebody stopped their car, took a picture of her, and drove off. I would love to see that photo. Story 28. Well, we were camping, and I have no idea how this even got started, but we were talking about her oversized truck and something about its speed when she blurted out the dumbest comment about how the speed of the vehicle was completely determined by the wheel's rotation, and even if a smaller car was driving at a higher MPH, she would beat them to their destination simply because her tires were bigger. I couldn't even come up with a solid response because her stupid literally shut down my brain. Later. During a shower, probably, I thought of the response to ask her how a jet must be slower because it has tiny wheels. Story 29. Something like this, but I guess the impression of every person I met, ever. How did they perceive me, liked me, dislike me, and especially why? Maybe that grocery store cashier disliked me because she put something together in their mind and decided I was something they dislike. Maybe someone really liked me, but their mental image of me was very wrong and they would have disliked the real me. Or maybe a good friend I had was truly the good friend and adored me as a person just as much I adored them. It's the stuff behind the masks that I'd be curious to know in fine detail. Besides, I'd be dead. I'd have all the time to dig into that. Story 30. No, how about how many times somebody was hitting on me or sending signals my way, and I purposely avoided any interaction by changing course entirely or doing something so horrifically awkward that their interest becomes extremely limited. Side-by-side stats. Not that they were unattractive to me, but that I was acting up that day or needed some space or was personally lacking self-care at the time. All the partied too hard opportunities, but impressions matter. Story 31. I mean, I've been present for several, in a consensual way, and involved in some remotely. Those count, right? Course, I can't know if they were actually imagining I was someone else, so that'd be interesting when interpreting the stat. OBVs, I'm more interested in the times I don't know about, including if I was a regular for anyone. Story 32. Alternately, how much stuff have I thrown or given away that I could have gotten big bucks for? I always wonder if some of my random jerk obscure toys from the 1970s and 1980s would be worth anything. Not like Star Wars figures, but random shoot no one except a very wealthy collector thinks about anymore. Story 33. One time, Tipsy, my friend, and I tried to roughly calculate how much cum someone produces on average in a lifetime. We said if you come once a day without fail till you're 50-odd, and we looked up how much cum someone produces per ejaculation, it would end up being a bathtub's worth, but I think those numbers are a little low. Story 34. When did it shift to friends? When I was a kid, it was kids, children, or students. Those teachers and I had absolutely nothing close to friendship. But it's all friends these days. Also, when did all teachers turn into at least moderately attractive 25-year-olds? All mine were at least 73 years old. I have to wonder if friends thing has impacted the authority figure relationship teachers used to have. Story 35. You don't need a ethereal stat counter for this one, though. Just get a bunch of sticky notes and pens and put one of each in every room of the house, both your cars and your wallet. Story 36. This would be interesting. In particular, the biggest missed opportunity by smallest margin. FYI, if you weren't thinking of this already, you might be interested to read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Story 37. I watched a pretty decent video about this topic a few days ago. There's tiny cells of cancer in our bodies all day, every day. It goes away thanks to our immune system. Scientists just now figured out how to stop cancer by modifying regular fat into brown fat so it consumes all the available glucose. Cancer just burns tons of glucose to grow because it doesn't have a mitochondria anymore and resets to default settings for survival. They made it work in small tests. I fully expect an easy procedure that stops cancer within the next decade. Story 38. We did a visit to our old high school for the reunion and met with some of our teachers. I know for a fact that I am the subject of at least 4 cautionary tales of stupidity told to new freshmen. I lived a life worth living, LMO. Story 39. Number 2 is kind of how I came up with my username for my more personal accounts. People always have a crazy friend with the same name as me, so when I'm introduced, I often hear, "Oh, you're Opasauri," to which I have to say, "No, I'm not that Opasauri, thankfully." Story 40. Theory. They're actually the same place. There's only one afterlife. Whether you experience it as heaven or hell is determined by whether you spend eternity scrolling through good stats to be proud of or bad stats to be embarrassed by. Story 41. Oh, I'm actually listening to stuff with headphones on. I'll just avoid any human interaction that is not absolutely necessary at all costs. If that means taking out the trash with headphones on blasting music, so be it. I'd much rather live lonely and in peace than having to experience the pile of shit called society and having to deal with other people's issues. Story 42. Imagine you make and develop one during your time you'll shoot at work, then make money off of that. Now you can add your current shoot time plus all of the app revenue you made because that was also money made with time you spent shoot at work. Story 43. Ha 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 ha. Me too, probably. I have a memory of once being at a uni library with a girl I was dating and her pointing out another girl who was giving me the eye. Was I supposed to have noticed it? Are men oblivious in this area? I have no idea. Story 44. My daughter's daycare had a parent event. An older child bumped into my daughter and was told, "Look to make sure you're not bumping into your friends." He replied with, "She's not my friend." Totally fair, emo. Story 45. I got kicked out of a prestigious army program for doing something stupid and getting caught that most people just don't get caught doing, rather than not do. I've met multiple people years later who, when hearing about it from me or a friend, go, "Oh, that was you. I heard about it." Story 46. Like the highlight reel in Mario Kart. How many times I almost died, how many times I almost eliminate someone. Also, what is the single biggest Nexus event in my life? Like that one small change that would have taken me in a completely different direction. Story 47. Man, that game was like peak gaming period for me. Couple of my friends and I used to squad up and play BF3 so much. We shifted to Destiny when that released, and that's another whole thing, but the BF3 days were the best. Story 48. So basically, I get treated like a star NFL player? Stats, highlight reels, heaven is the Pro Bowl or something? Or is it more like the draft? Listen, if I find out that I also get the money and lavish lifestyle, I may have to rethink my atheism. Story 49. I know mine. I had heard about Bitcoin. I wanted to try and mine some just for fun. Read an article that very day about how it cost more electricity to mine one. Didn't go through with it. I'm pretty frugal with money and that kind of thing. Those Bitcoins would have sat there doing nothing but gain value for years. Story 50. Nothing interesting, sorry. I just got caught breaking regulation in a way you don't usually get caught. Think using a phone in a place time you're not supposed to. The reason the story gets told is just that it takes a considerable bit of bad luck to get caught, since a lot of people actually break these regulations and assume nothing can really come of it. Story 51. Nah, that is a bad one. For example, there is a lottery here based on postal codes. When a postal code wins, the people who didn't buy in and see their neighbors win tend to have massive regrets. Depression is common and even tragic end in some cases, since they missed their chance and get faced with their life without that money and the dreams they have of what they would do if they had. Story 52. How many people's lives I've made a huge impact in. You always hear stories about people who are having awful days, and then one person's actions give them hope again. I'd like to know how many people I've really helped. Answer. I know this isn't in the theme of the original post, but your comment resonated with me, and I have to tell this story. I work as an X-ray technologist and see thousands of people come through the door every year. Some you remember, most you don't, as they're pretty routine. There was one young man that I CT scanned and X-rayed before he was diagnosed with cancer, through his treatment, during his surgeries, and while in remission. When he was first diagnosed, he was an emotional wreck, and I took the time to sit with him and talk through it for as long as I could. I told him the truth of what he would experience from the healthcare perspective, but that a lot of the healing process was psychological. He couldn't give up because then the cancer would win. The last time he saw me, he pulled me aside and said, "I don't want to be creepy, but your actions and kind words helped me through the darkest times of my cancer. If it were not for you, I would have eliminated myself long before remission. Thank you." I was so shocked I really didn't have anything profound to say, but gave him a big hug. I had to go to the private bathroom to cry for a bit. It just makes me wonder how many people I've extended a kind word or hand to have been helped. I know there were people that helped me out in dark times, and I've never had the opportunity to thank them like my patient did. Story 53. Honestly, the nerd in me would want to see it all, in mind-numbingly minute detail, volume of food broken down by individual foods in descending order, eaten, volume of bodily fluids ejected, separate categories for feces, urine, vomit, semen, spit, snot, intimacy stats, thrusts, orgasms achieved, orgasms given, OA-OG ratio, number of moves positions used, favorite move position, most effective move position, times self-care, transportation stats, distance walked, biked, and driven, flow neck, hours spent in vehicles, breakdown by type, laws broken, citations received, vices, substances, chemicals, and intoxicants consumed with equivalent volumes, most popular combinations, itemized monetary value of consumed substances, total amount spent on legal fees, entertainment, hours TV, radio, movies, personal music library consumed, top tracks, genres, artists, directors, actors, events watched, listened to, Number of live shows gone to. Reports on money spent on shows, music, film movies. Similarly appropriate categories for sporting events watched, attended. Social lifetime number of friends, good friends, romantic interests, girlfriends, wives, etc. And hopefully this will have some sort of algorithm to determine who I was closest to for various points on an interactive timeline that I can scroll at my leisure. List of those who had romantic interest in me, with corresponding dates. Similar list for those I had romantic interest in. An overlay of these two lists would be very interesting and perhaps disappointing at times. Financial. Lifetime dollars earned, lifetime dollars spent. Average HR of entire existence. A pie chart of where my money went. Pie charts and money go hand in hand. Breakdown of how money was earned. Job 1, Job 2, garage sales, stripping, substances sales, robbery, etc. Story 54. Eliminate count. Not intentionally, but who died because of my actions. Things like, on June 18th, 1009, 194, you decided to buy a can of Coke. Bob Schruterberger noticed you walking down the street with the Coke, decided he wanted one as well, and then promptly had a heart attack when he was startled by fizz inhalation. Story 55. So much potential. Here are just a few I came up with. Number of lives that changed, at least somewhat significantly, because of me. Some highlights of the more interesting cases would be great. This would definitely be the most interesting one. Number of girls who have ever been attracted to me. Anger, fear, anxiety versus happiness, joy ratio. Number of unique people I've ever seen in real life. Total number of unique people I've ever seen, including through media, etc. Number of people who've ever seen me. Number of people who liked, disliked, were indifferent about me. Total time spent doing actual productive work. Also, total time spent fapping. Total time spent shoot. Total time spent pissing. Total time spent farting. Story 56. I've often said that hell would be hearing all the things people said about me behind my back. But of course that's not true for really nice people. So yeah, after passing, everyone should get to have to hear all the things said about them behind their back. Whether it's heavenly or hellish depends on how you lived, I guess. Story 57. Number of times people talked shoot about me and who. Then I would haunt the worst offenders. Number of times people said good things about me when I wasn't around and who. Then I would do nice ghost things for them. Story 58. A movie of every dream I've ever had. Some of them are pretty weird. How much blood lost, how many sneezes, and how many hours I've spent playing with my boobs. Edit. To make myself clear, the blood loss is because I was a clumsy child and used to have a lot of nosebleeds. Didn't even think about the period thing. Ooh, and yes, I'm a girl. Story 59. I want to see all of the booze I drank in an aquarium exhibit, all the bud I've smoked organized into a forest exhibit, and inhabiting all of the exhibits will be all of the girls that I've had intimacy with at their absolute hottest. And then I'll get to drink, smoke, and bang for the rest of eternity.